Hello, folks. I am so excited. I have a guest with me, Mr. Crom Carmichael, and I've known Crom for many years. He was a frequent guest speaker when I was on the faculty at Vanderbilt. The students just loved him, and we're here today to talk about a product that he has called the Giants of Political Thought. Crom?
Carol, thanks so much. I sure appreciate it. And you are right. We go back more years than either one of us want to admit. But what's interesting to me is that I told you about what we were doing with the Giants of Political Thought, and you kind of tilted your head and said, well, that's interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more. And so you listened to some of our programs, and what was your reaction to that?
I think the programs are fantastic, and I told Crom that I thought they would be a great learning tool for adults that want to continue their education or to understand better those great works of Western civilization that they sort of skimmed over in college, but also for the homeschooling parents, those who are trying to educate their children in the best ideas of the Western world. Well, the Giants of Political Thought makes all of that easier for us.
Yeah, and what we do, Carol, is we take people who are influential. We call that a giant. And some of the giants who were very influential had very bad ideas, but they still were very influential ideas. And so that's why, as you and I have often said, ideas have consequences. And so what we try to do is provide our customers with the ideas that shaped history for good or for bad.
Okay, so that would mean that you would have Karl Marx.
Yes, we covered the Communist Manifesto, we cover the social contract, but then on the other side we cover Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, we cover democracy in America, we cover 2 treatises of government, and of course we cover common sense and the Declaration of Independence.
Now, Crom, I want you to slow down a little bit,
okay,
because for some of the people, these great works of literature, these thoughts like Adam Smith, the Wealth of Nations, it may not have much meaning, but can you tell them why they would want to know about Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Adam Smith was an economist in Great Britain. He was very absent-minded, by the way, and he was more of an ethicist than he was an economist. But when he started thinking about economics, he was the first person to really lay out the principles that individual liberty leads to prosperity and to a better society. And so what he talked about in The Wealth of Nations is the nature of innovation, where it comes from, but he also talked about a term that he called mercantilism, which we would call...
Go ahead.
We'd call it crony capitalism today.
And he also came up with a very famous concept that everyone in political science and econ tends to learn. Would you like to share our audience with that concept?
Well, why don't you tell us?
It starts with an L.
Okay.
Laissez-faire.
Oh, laissez-faire. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Let the market rule.
Yes. And so it really would be totally against all the regulations and what we see today that tends to strangle businesses.
Yes, and what Adam Smith would say is that many of those regulations are there because the people who already have economic power want the regulations to protect their own interests.
And I think it's interesting that you went for the crony capitalism, and the laissez-faire is something that it just seems like every undergraduate has to memorize that and has to know what that means, but when you look at how the economy operates and the ideas that people have today about economics, you would think that they have no sense of, well, it was important when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, but is it today? How does it impact my life? It's almost like it's something that you memorize and then you forget about.
Well, people get used to the way things are, and they don't realize what is wrong with the way things are. They have a harder time with that. And so what Adam Smith did was he laid this out. Of course, at the time, a lot of his ideas were quite controversial. And it took time for his ideas to manifest themselves in economics, and they manifested themselves, even though he was in Great Britain, they manifested themselves here sooner than they manifested themselves there.
And another thing, Crom, I think that almost all of my followers and friends would be interested in is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. Could you tell us what you have to help people better understand those documents?
Yes. We have a program on common sense, which was, of course, the pamphlet that more or less ignited or certainly helped ignite the War of Independence. And then we have a program on the Declaration of Independence itself. We also have 2 treatises of government, which is what John Locke wrote back in the 18th century that Thomas Jefferson used a good amount of for the Declaration of Independence. We have Democracy in America by de Tocqueville. We have the Federalist Papers. And so it's a wide range of very, very important thinking. We include Leviathan, which talks about bigger government and how bigger government gets bigger. We have The Prince by Machiavelli, how to acquire power and what to do to keep it. He was a very sneaky guy.
Yes, I know. And yes, and Thomas Paine's Common Sense. We know that today common sense is in short supply.
Yes.
But he used that tract to outline why it would be common sense to separate ourselves from Britain.
Right.
He laid out the case for the American Revolution.
He certainly did. And what he talked about in Common Sense was really if there were no government and there was a small group of people, how would they want to think about government and governing themselves? And what would be the rules that they would want to establish prior to passing the laws that might govern them?
Right.
And so he talked about that, and then he talked about how the king, in particular, he attacked King George, and he talked about how the king was denying America's rights, and in fact was a tyrant. He called King George a tyrant.
And we know that Thomas Jefferson, that he also had a lot to contribute. How does he fit into the giants of political thought? Which part of his contributions do you focus on?
Well, the Declaration of Independence is the main one that we have. We pair that one with the Thomas Paine's Common Sense because they came so close together. And Jefferson in his Declaration of Independence. By the way, let me mention one other thing before I forget, and that is when somebody buys the Giants of Political Thought, not only do they get the audio programs, but they also get the transcripts, so they can if they can study the transcripts if they want to, and we have questions and answers that are divided into 3 categories. One is questions of fact, so you can kind of see if you know the facts, the dates, the names, and these types of things. Then there's questions of understanding that might be, what did Jefferson mean when he wrote such and such, and it's explained in the tapes. And then the other would be the essay questions that don't really have a particular answer. For example, would the Constitution have been written if the Declaration of Independence had never been written?
Okay.
Those types of questions.
So homeschooling teachers and people that are involved in educating young people, it seems that this would be a great resource. And a lot of times I know that for people who are teachers, you're at the liberty of textbooks. And sometimes those textbooks are authored by people who don't share your values, people who hate Western civilization. And so here's an opportunity to go to the original sources and to really educate yourself and your children about these great documents.
And what we do in our programs is we have a narrator who reads the script that our authors write, but then when we quote from a historical figure, we use an actor to do that. So it's very, very clear to the listeners.
It's very dynamic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Well, would you like to tell everyone how they can become owners? And you did promise me that my followers would get your best ever price.
Yes.
Okay.
And what we do is this. We work with you on your website, carolmswain.com, carolmswain.com.
/Giants.
/Giants, or there'll be a little button on your website that says Giants of Political Thought. Click here.
Right.
And that will take you to where you can download the app and buy the Giants of Political Thought. And these stream on up to 5 different devices, so you can share them with family members.
Right. That'll be great for people that are
And so they stream, and you'll download an app, and then for all 12 programs, it's $84.95 for all, and there's 17 different thinkers covered, and there's so it's almost 36.
That's a whole course, that could be a semester if you're doing the homeschooling, or if you're in college and you're taking a course that involves political thought. You could get a leg up, to say, by having these resources.
Yeah, and it's $84.95, and you get back in the day when we were selling them as cassette tapes, because we started producing these back in the 1980s, and I think the Declaration of Independence and understanding it is more relevant today than it was in the 80s.
Well, clearly it's under attack. Everything that's part of the groundwork of Western civilization. And so you've digitized everything, and everything is just ready to go.
Ready to go. Download the app, and you can listen whenever you want to. And as I said, you can share them on five devices. Okay,
so folks, you've heard it. And if you need more information, feel free to email me through the website or Crom. He will be accessible through me, and we can get your questions answered.
Thanks, Carol. I appreciate it.
Thank you.